Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I apologize for my long absence. It has been a bit too long. I was sick a couple weeks ago. I had the MVP summit last week, but I am back once again. More coding, more fun, more material design in XAML. Real quick, on the note of so jump gears here real quick. So anyone who hasn't done so, I would highly recommend signing up for the Microsoft Build Conference. It is free for the online portion. It does cost if you want to be in person in Seattle. It is going to be an awesome event. At some point, I'll probably put up a my pick of sessions that I am looking forward to. There's a whole lot of stuff in here around AI, not really shocking given all of the cool stuff that's been coming out of Microsoft and GitHub recently. So you can see, I mean, just scrolling in the first six, we've got AI. So, it's kind of a big deal. All the chat GPT things. So also, if that's an interesting topic to people, I've been playing around with it, building stuff on it. Seems kind of cool. It's kind of fun. But if that's something that interests people and you'd like to see sort of some examples of plugging that thing into your own app, let me know. Okay. Yeah, that's some total plan. As you can tell, it's been a long couple weeks. I did not prep a brain teaser. I'm behind on my videos. I'm just like, you know what? I'm not going to stress. We're just going to catch up as things happen. And holy cow, my office has gotten hot today, and I don't know why. Where I live, we have a joke that we usually get winter, second winter, and then spring is about 4 days long, and then you get summer. And it's great. Okay, so it was going to start with a pull request review here and maybe play around with a couple other PRs as well. And actually, I think I'm going to go here and bring this tab back and do this. Okay, so this was a request that came in on the Discord channel, I don't know, a while back. And the gentleman who had proposed it, I was like, sure, sounds great. Like, if you want to put together a draft PR, we can see about merging it. I'm not necessarily planning on bringing all controls, like every control somebody can dream up, into the library, but this is one that has been requested a number of times. The Material Design Extensions library has a version of it. It's great, but it's clearly popular enough that people want it. So I figured let's go ahead and do it. 1 second here. I just want to verify that my... There we go. All the links, not just the Get Kraken link. Okay. So, but draft PR is open, so I figured we'll dive in, take a look. It looks pretty good as it is here. Like, there's a lot of stuff. So you can see the changes made here. Created a new numeric up down control that allows the user to either type in numeric values within a specific range. Great. Implemented first style for it. Perfect. I mean, the style is very simplistic. There's probably some optional improvements here. Integrated the numeric up down with the material design main demo and added a page to display styles. Perfect. Like, as far as like a minimum viable product goes, can't ask for a lot more. Okay, so potentially more documentation. Very true. Support for common input methods such as keyboard and mouse input. Yeah, this is one that I would probably consider at minimum. So mouse, I think just having the two buttons for interaction is probably fine, but having keyboard up down arrows is functioning to move things up and down is probably worthwhile. Logarithmic click scroll. I guess mouse scroll could be an interesting one. It's a little awkward. Most users don't expect form fields to change on scroll wheel. And the other thing is, if you catch the mouse scroll, if this is put inside of a scroll viewer, it can be one of those obnoxious things. So less sold on mouse, light keyboard. Let's see, logarithmic scroll to go up and down. I could see it. It depends on, I guess it depends on what you're putting in here. Let's see. Tune the base style to adhere more closely to the material design principles. Yeah, I do think cleaning some of this up a little bit, and we'll dive in and take a look at it and see if these, I think there's actually icons for the plus and minus, and I just visually, I think those are characters, but again, not a big deal. Create additional styling templates to provide more options. Yeah, I know there's a couple different ways that people do this. One of the things that immediately jumps out to me as well is typically going lower is on the left and going up is on the right. So these buttons almost feel a little backwards to me. And add the new styles and back and forth. The only other thing that I could potentially see adding for the potential changes is adding a couple UI tests around it. But as you can see, there's a bunch of stuff here. And there's the maps one. Okay, cool. So there's all of that. I'm trying to decide, do we look at the code here or do we just, let's briefly, we'll ignore the demo for the moment. Let's just briefly look at this and then we'll circle back to the other one. Okay, so the control itself, that's tiny font bigger. This is gonna be hard to see. Let's get cracking. Let's see. Add and check out, please. Thank you. And let's go material design. And away we go. We will take a look. So I don't care about what tabs you have open. Close all tabs. Okay, so numeric up, down. Okay. So for anybody looking to build a brand new custom control, this is actually set up pretty close to exactly what you want to do. So first thing when building a custom control is first decide if that's actually what you want versus a user control. There's pros and cons to each. The user control tends to be a little bit easier. Custom controls require more work. But in this case, within this kind of library setup, a custom control is the right choice. The next decision point is what your base class is going to be. Oftentimes, something like control or content control can be quite common as reasonable bases. Content control, if you want a control that kind of maybe wraps some other user-provided content, perhaps. In this case, regular control is very reasonable. And then anything that you are going to require as part of your template. So there's a separation in WPF between the code behind for the control, which is what this is, and then the UI portion of it. But at some point, there has to be that linkage back of, you know, how do I interact with it? So what this control is doing is declaring that, okay, you can do a new template and change the UI however you want. But at the end of the day, I expect a couple repeat buttons and a text box. Okay, great. And just by convention, template parts are prefixed with all caps part underscore. So increase button, decrease button, text box. This has the word field on it, and I'm not sure how I feel about the word field. I'm sure that's probably on some other ones, but the word field makes me a little twitchy. We'll see. We'll come back to that for the moment. Okay. The other thing to do is to set the default style key. So I've talked before about how styles work in WPF, how there's a target type, and a style will have a key as well. If you do not specify a key, the key is derived from the target type. What this is doing here is it's saying, okay, the default style key for this control is a style who has a target type of numeric up, down. Perfect, right? That's sort of the default that you would want. So that is quite common to do in your static constructor. And then we've got a bunch of dependency properties. So we've got minimum, maximum, let's see, int min value, int max value, great. Like some people might argue and say, well, what if that's not big enough? The user's clicking to move these. How many times are they really going to click? Let's see, the current value. Great. Really, all I'm doing is double checking things like the declared type, the default value, and just to make sure that the property metadata is set appropriately. This thing does have an on value changed. We'll circle back to that in a moment. Take a look. Let's see. A couple commands that can be specified. And that looks fine. Increase, decrease command, great. Okay. The only other thing that could be potentially useful, this is very well set up for somebody using this control in an MVVM layout. I don't know. This looks like somebody may have copied and pasted too much. I would have expected something more like that. Minor deal is, oh, maybe they're down here. I was going to say routed events. Never mind. Here they are. And this is actually very good design. So a lot of times when people do routed events on a control, they'll forget to do things like apply categories so that they're set appropriately. This is, I think, just about perfect setup. So the thing with routed events versus a regular C# event, routed events can route through the UI hierarchy, which is very convenient. It's also what, if somebody wants to use this control and access it in the code behind, this is probably the most likely case that they're going to want to do. The other thing I could see potentially adding here is, like, we've got commands on here, but just like how the button control has both a command and a click handler, I could see arguments for an event for, you know, the increase and decrease things to be clicked. I could also see an argument for putting in min-max are textbook example for coercion callbacks. Yeah. The other thing is I could also see these commands needing command parameters. So that's another thing. And again, I'm basing this on, like, I like to look for prior art on other controls to mimic, and button has a lot of symmetry here of being able to set this kind of stuff up. Now, admittedly, this particular template has a text box and 2 buttons in it, but I would kind of expect that those types of things flow back and forth. But as a first run, not bad at all. Okay, value changed, comes in, cast the control. There's only a minor thing here that I might comment on. So this is a nullable numeric up down at this point, and it instantiates, and it is appropriately null checked. The thing is you've gone to all of the effort to instantiate this, even if it's not a numeric up down. Now, this is a private static function inside of the control. I'm not that, like, I can't write code very easily to trigger this and have this not and hit the null case here. So it's less of a concern, but oftentimes I would do pattern matching or similar to avoid this instantiation if this control is null. But right now I can't think of how I would write a test to trigger the null case. So it's like, that's a minor thing, not a big deal. Also, welcome, Nikolai. Validate input. Okay, and this one here, so I see property name is being passed in here, but it's completely unused. Which and I have a suspicion. Yeah, so this guy was passing it in. I suspect the intent here was to have a raise property changed event. Yeah, and this guy here is this is sort of a little awkward, like, because Nikolai put in the chat there the doing coercion for these types of ones. So rather than validating input here, because all this method does is it takes in the input object, calls to string, verifies it parses as an int, right? And then basically locks it into the min-max. Robert, welcome. Yes, WPF, custom controls. This works, but there's a cleaner approach. So on your property metadata, there is an additional overload. In addition to the property change callback, you have a coerce value callback. And I believe this is what you were referring to, Nikolai, is rather than doing this validate input here, because it's very unusual when you're implementing one of these wrapper properties, to not just have them look like this. Like, that's real common. And instead, the validation would be over on this side. That way, the dependency property chain works. The other drawback with doing it inside of these getters and setters is not everything actually flows through this value property. So even though it looks like everything flows through the value property, this is actually exposed on the control. And there's nothing magical that prevents somebody, because set value, for example, this is just a public method on dependency object. So for example, right? Oh, let's not do it inside of a static method. I need an instance method. This will work. So somebody outside could very easily call, you know, let's see, new num gets new whatever, right? But I could bypass the value and call set value, right? And then do numeric up down value property, you know, 45, well outside my maximum, and bypass that validation logic that's being put in there. Let's see. Thanks only briefly here. We'll catch recording. Working on a fix on this local branch. Hope to have improvements ready soon. Let's see. Let's pop this open. Field text box hint. Cool. Yeah, I was actually, if you're working on a fix for this, I will do it. I don't think I'm going to kick a 4.9 release tonight, but there's enough in there that I think it should go. I tried to poke at my theming stuff last week and only got so far. Send you music. Welcome. Hello, hello. Just doing a code review on Numeric Up Down. I will say, so this was also done, the user had messaged me on this PR on Discord about it. Apparently they're a bit new to some of this WPF stuff, so if you're watching the recording, what is it, C# coding noob? Don't feel bad. This is you did a remarkably good job if this is your first custom control. Let's see, how long have you been doing software development? Let's see. I got to do math now with years in it. I think I am coming up on 14 years. I feel old now. I think it's been about 14 years. And pretty much that entire time I have been doing Microsoft tech stack. Like, some people bounce around and get a lot of exposure to different things. Once I graduated from university, I really didn't like, so I'm in Washington State. Microsoft is in Redmond in Washington. They're like 4.5 hours away from me. And so even though some people will say, oh, you know, this language or this framework is really popular or whatnot, it's like, that may be true, but I'm really close to Microsoft. And that has there's a much larger Microsoft set of developers the closer you get to Redmond. And even though I'm 4.5 hours away, there's still a substantial amount of C#, .NET Microsoft stuff. See you, Nikolai. Have a good day. Okay. Okay, so this validate input probably should be converted into a coerce property callback. And we'll write this up in the PR because I think this control is largely being used as a learning opportunity. Also been doing Microsoft.NET based development as well. C# API, MVC, not much WPF though. Don't feel too bad. WPF is, I don't want to say a dying breed. It is one of the mature desktop development frameworks. Theoretically, things like .NET MAUI and WinUI 3 are supposed to be the replacements, but Microsoft has tried to introduce a replacement for WPF twice now, and I will argue has failed twice now. So I'm not holding my breath. I'm waiting. I would very happily like to see some stuff going. Yeah. Maui I've been doing recently. Yeah, Maui is fairly nice. Like, I still have yet to... I need to play with Maui in the context of doing a desktop app. I've only done Maui in terms of Android and iOS. So and a little bit there. It's very good. It is significantly better than Xamarin Forms. It is awesome. The Blazor hybrid stuff looks utterly amazing to me. So for what those are worth. Okay, so apply template. So this is interesting. I rarely see somebody handle the case of unregistering the events. So these ones here, you don't actually need the null checks or the null forgiveness operators on these clicks. So it is good to make sure you're appropriately handling null, but in these cases, you're accessing UI elements, and you're not allowed to touch a UI element outside of the UI thread. So because all UI element interaction has to be single threaded, you can guarantee that once you've checked this field for null, that no other thread can change it to be null between point A and point B. So just by virtue of the framework, you can trust it. So things like these null forgiveness operators aren't necessarily needed there. But pulls the template elements out, checks them. Once again, the null check isn't necessarily, or the null forgiveness operator isn't needed there. Interesting that we also did lost focus. And value gets applied in. That all makes sense of applying it straight through. I'm curious why something seems a little off here, and I'm trying to figure out what it is. So one, that can go away. The initial setting of the text is fine. And this likely needs to occur before this up down. Let's finish our way through and double check. Okay, so sender is null, return. So this is all fine, but this is actually really overkill. This method could be reduced to this. And one could argue that it should really be something like if text box field is, let's see, text box, and then something like this. For anybody who hasn't seen it, the double curly braces, this is just a null check and an assignment into a local variable. So it's doing several things. It's checking this field for null. If this is non-null, create and assign a new local variable that's in scope inside this if statement. The entire expression returns true, which gets you inside, and then you get to do it. Let's see, I'm from Sri Lanka, was studying in New Zealand. What should I do to get a job in a foreign country? Let's see. Oh boy. That I don't have a ton of information on. So, general job market stuff, what I would recommend is making sure that you have a reasonable resume posted up on something public. ideally with code samples. So if that's like a GitHub repo or similar. And actually, hang on, there was a video myself and a few colleagues did not that long ago. It was targeted at, sorry, I'm trying to find it. Let's see. Yeah, it was targeted at specifically at people who were looking for internships, but a lot of it applies beyond just software interns. So it's this video here. A lot of it applies beyond just internships and anyone who's looking to kind of get into software development and do the work. So, I mean, a couple key tips: have an updated resume, have something public with code that you can share. It's much easier for people to want to interview you if you've got code examples that you can share. If you don't have anything, that's not necessarily going to exclude you, but you likely get moved further down people's hiring lists in a lot of cases. Now, I'm also speaking from somebody who's in America, so I don't have a lot of knowledge outside of that. So everywhere else, take it with a grain of salt. And I also don't have any knowledge on like visas or that kind of thing. That is the company I work for. We have people in HR and whatnot. Starting a blog is definitely not a bad idea. The thing to note is that when people are looking at your resume, they may, if they see a link to a blog, they may open it and read through an entry or two that look interesting, but most of the time when people are reading stuff, they're not likely to read long blog posts or similar. So if you have something that you can use to show expertise, that will certainly help. Really, anything you can do to show off what you know, that's great. And if blogging is something that you know and can do well, great. Just know that at least when we're interviewing, the blog post can be helpful, but it's not usually as helpful as looking to see what somebody can actually do. Blog posts are kind of a weird situation because when people on my team ask me about writing blog posts, I usually tell them, hey, entry-level content isn't a bad thing to write blogs about. People are like, well, but there's a lot of it. It's like, yeah, but if you try to search for how to do something and it's difficult for you to kind of piece the things together, write a blog specifically on that. Even if it's kind of entry-level stuff, if it was hard for you to do, then it's usually an indication that there's a gap somewhere in either samples, documentation, or whatnot. And it's very worthwhile, especially entry-level content gets so many more hits than advanced level content because your audience is so much bigger. Blog, but YouTube video plus code sample. Yeah, that would be awesome. Something like that is likely to get you looked at very quickly. So if you are looking, again, I don't know much about hiring people out of country or remote work across country boundaries because I don't interact with that much. But yeah, something like that would definitely make you stand out above the crowd. Okay, so numeric value changed. Text box focus. Yeah, not a problem, Zen Music. People who watch my channel a lot will know that I am very happy to rabbit trail and answer questions as they come up. So whatever questions you got, I can't guarantee I'll know the answer, but I'm happy to try. Yeah, I will say on a lot of event handlers in WPF, it is a little unusual to go after the sender. It's not completely uncommon to do something like this. I've seen this pattern a lot, but most of the time when I see this sample, it's people who have come out of Windows Forms and this is what they were taught to do. The other thing is this if statement is kind of meaningless with this one here because you get identical behavior omitting it. Because if this is null, the cast fails, this is null, and then you're going to jump out of this as well. The other thing to be aware of is oftentimes with newer C# syntax, you don't want to do equals equals null. A stronger idea is to do an is null. So these ones here are, so the equals equals null, the reason it's generally less preferable is because the double equals operator can be overridden. Now in this case, it's not going to be a big deal. You're going to get reference equality. This is an object. But in general, I usually tell people if you want to do a reference equality against null, an is null is better. Older versions of C#, the recommendation was reference equals, which is a static method on object, to be explicit about null checks. But you'll note here that the analyzers are already hinting to you, hey, there's a much simpler syntax. 156 method, can you rewrite and show? I might need some feedback on what that is. I'm not sure what 156 method is referring to. Oh, this one here, the text box lost focus on line 156. Yeah, so let's see here. If I was going through and rewriting it, I wouldn't be, I generally wouldn't be looking at this. So because this is an event handler method coming from the text box field, I would probably drop all of this. And I would be doing something more akin to if text box field is text box. Again, I like my pattern matching. And then I would bring something like this up and do text box. So I would probably rewrite it more akin to this. And again, this validate input method is just the one that does a try parse. And I might want to take a closer look at this. It's taking in a parameter of an object. And the only reason it's taking in an object is because it's being invoked from both here and down here. So it's abusing the fact that integer toString and string toString are going to get you similar results. If this wasn't an integer, there's a potential flaw here as well, because the toString method is going to be culture specific. It doesn't bite usually as hard on integers, but it will certainly bite you on doubles. I usually enjoy picking on French because that's one of the easy languages that I know that the decimal separator is a comma rather than a period, as it is in English. And oftentimes I'll see people make assumptions about the decimal separator being a period, and that's a horrible thing to do. Don't do that. The workaround is usually just to specify culture info and be explicit about what culture you expect, right? The drawback here is you can't specify culture info on object toString. But there is a culture override on things like int toString, right? So if I go value toString, this guy here, thank you, Copilot, does have an I format provider. People often see I format provider and don't realize what the implementing class is for that interface. The common one for I format provider is usually culture info. So if you see an I format provider in an API, just mentally think, culture. So there's a lot of APIs that leverage it, typically around like the numeric parsing methods. I think GUID has it. A lot of toString methods will take in a I format provider for doing culture specific formatting. Okay, increase button on click. I don't know that you actually need to mark the event as handled. I don't think you do. It's not hurting anything, but the underlying button will already do that for you. So this is probably not needed. Okay, so let's see increase, decrease. Okay, so here for the command, it's passing through the value of this. So the iCommand interface wants to have a parameter of type object. The intent, though, is for that object to either be some parameter specified here. So ideally, what we would probably do is either have the command parameter be the value, or even better would be a second dependency property that's increased command parameter. And that way it can feed through. That way, if somebody wants it to be value, they can just data bind that in. But passing this is probably incorrect. If there's not a parameter to pass, typically for commands, you would end up passing just null. And I also would probably do well, I'm trying to think. Would you do the increment before the command? I think the answer is yes. Because I think on things like radio button, I want to look real quick. I think radio button, when you toggle the on checked, oh, darn you. Let's see. Take me to you here. There. Go. I believe it sets the check state and then invokes the command. Let's see. Register, unregister, ungroup. Group name unchecked. Update radio button group. So this is going to go through and do the check state of all the things. Uncheck radio button, move all of those. That's all fine. That's all fine. And then base unchecked. And I think this is what's going to... That's raising the event. Where is the command triggered from? I'm trying to remember where the command is, where in the hierarchy it is. Button base. So that's going to be down further. I'm fairly confident you want to do the value increment first and the command second. Because typically, if you fire off the command, the consumer of the command is the first thing that they're going to want is what's the current value. And so you want to be able to grab that. Same thing for decrease. Effectively the same thing. This should become null or a dependency property reference, and this should probably occur first. I am noticing a minor code thing here as well. There's some duplicated logic here where validate input is restricting it, as well as this thing here. So the nice part is if the min maximum were done as a coerce method on the dependency property of value, you wouldn't need this logic in here. You'd literally just do value minus equals 1 and you're done. So we'll check that. Okay, so preview key down. And in these cases, you do need to mark these as handled. Otherwise, the text box will do it. So this is using preview key down. So in WPF, there's two events. When you hit a key, two events happen. The preview event starts at your window and walks through the visual tree down to where your text box is. The text box then handles that key press. So the on the way down, the tunneling event is all the events that start with the word preview. Once the control, in this case the text box, handles it, it then fires another event called key down that bubbles from the text box back up to the window. So that's the tunneling versus bubbling events. And by marking something as handled, it means most controls, either on the way down or on the way up, won't see the event. You can still say, hey, I want all events, even if they've been marked as handled. But by default, unless you've used the API that lets you set that flag, which you have to be very explicit about. By default, you'll only get events that are unhandled. So in this case, just hijacking it and then marking it as handled so that the text box doesn't try to do anything with it. Oh, this is interesting. It did handle scroll. Well, let's play with it real quick and see how it goes, and then we'll come back and clean up a little of this code. So I'm curious. The mouse wheel is interesting. I don't know if that's expected behavior or not. I'm a little torn. I could kind of go either way, especially since this is on. Oh, this has 0 references. Both. Oh, but these are overrides. Because this is on the control, this feels awkward. I'd almost want the mouse wheel event, if we were going to do it, to only be on the text box. Here, let's see. So there should be a numeric up down. Great. That one. Okay, so I can go plus and go minus, and it works. I mean, and I can come in here and I can type, 42, because that's obviously the right answer. Great. Let's just look at this. The setup for this is about as stupid simple as you can get. It might be nice to have a sample that has the min-max set on it as well, just so that people can experience what that's like. Not a huge deal. And then mouse wheel works. But here's the other thing. Mouse wheel works even if I'm over here. That feels weird to me. I think the mouse wheel behavior, I don't mind it, but I would probably only expect it to trigger when my cursor is over the text box. I think that would be my expectation. And then let's see if I go here and I just do keyboard. It is interesting. Like, I get why it's happening, because you're changing the text box's text. There is a clever trick that could be done there. Where is it? Yeah, so on value changed, it is going through and doing this. And actually, I don't even know if you need this event handler. Okay, let's clean some of this up. I think we can do. Let's see what the end result should probably look like. So I don't think we need this event handler. Let's jump into here. Actually, I want the numeric up down style, which I guess we should probably verify that, because the style itself, I believe, is pretty basic. So yeah, so inside of the control template, and this is a very, very simplistic one, but it's roughly what you'd expect. It's a dock panel. One button is docked left, one button's docked right. The content's set here. So if I were to do this, I would probably invert these and go right, left. Right? I just picture like a number line. Further left goes minus, further up goes there. The template bindings are set here. Oh, look at that. There is a template binding for text. So we shouldn't realistically need... Well, and horizontal... Oh, this is horizontal content alignment. Okay. That's fine. This is setting dock top. I don't think you need this, because the default behavior for a dock panel, and this has got a min width of 50. I think what I would do is I would not have this min width be here, and I would just use the min width on the style setter itself, just so that the control has a reasonable minimum. However, the advantage of doing it just in the style setter is that it then allows somebody using the style to override your minimum if they don't like it. If you hard code it, in anything that's hard coded inside of the template quickly becomes problematic. because it's not easily overridable by anyone else. Let's see, grid column 0 isn't needed because we're not inside of a grid, so that does nothing. We'll whack that. Let's see, corner radius is here. I almost wonder if corner radius should end up being a dependency property on numeric up down. The other thing is I don't think you want to set font size. Things with font are usually expected to be set higher up and inherit down. Oh, and then the thing with dock panel is dock panel default is last child fill. So this property here, if we jump to it, of course it's not going to show it to me. Let's see, F4. Let's see. Last child fill. Oh, I should probably turn this off. This guy here. False, true. But you'll note if I clear it, default value. Why are you not yeah, default value is checked for true. So the last child by default here is going to fill the remaining space. So I think you can get away with this. And then I think what we can do here is pack icon kind plus. And I don't know if these are exactly the right icons that we would want, but I think we would probably want something like that. Yeah, and I don't even know if you need to set a minimum height. The only reason you might want to set a minimum width is to keep that middle text box from just being collapsed on. But let's give that a try. Because I don't think you end up needing this numeric up-down value change to set the text box text, because you are template binding directly into value. You don't need to. The template binding will update automatically for you. Now, if it's not, I have a feeling I know why. It may not be defaulting to a two-way binding. Yeah, so that minimum width there is probably not big enough. Min width 80. Okay, 200. What's the right value? 400. Are you updating or not? That's what I thought. You're not updating properly. Okay, fine. Snoop, come here. I need you. Thank you. Do your thing. Okay. Let's look at this guy. And then I want to go up to the numeric up down. Let's see. Min width. And let's do 200. That's too big. 100. That's a little small. 120. A little small. 130. Probably good. 2-digit number. That's probably not too bad at all. So 120, give or take a little bit, might be a reasonable starting point. And then, or I'm sorry, 130 is what we did. And then I think these these buttons might need to be theoretically styled down a little bit, because I think these guys here have a padding set on them by default that might just need to be dialed back. So if we go down here to these guys here, let's see, I think there's a padding, that's move me up to the button. Yeah, so the default style on the raised button is a little big. And ultimately, I think we should probably be applying a different style to these buttons to kind of clean them up, but I would probably dial them down to be more, maybe even like an 8-4 or something. Yeah, because having the padding on those things be set to like 8.4 is probably a little closer to getting a nice square setup, or square-ish setup, at least for default. And again, the thicker padding that's on there is because these are using the default raised material design button style, which we've got a bunch of them. So if we look at the buttons, so they're by default landing here, but we could do a couple options. It might even be nice to do like the flatter button, because the difference is, and it's harder to see in the dark theme. If we go light theme, it's a little more obvious. Toggle there. This one here, you can, let's see, I don't have zoom over. This guy here, you can see the shadow underneath it, whereas this one down here, there's no shadow. So it may be nicer to not use the shadow one and maybe use this flat button on it. I could possibly go. I don't know if I'm really sold too much on it. The other thing is even though we've set up this repeat button here, I think a behavior more people are going to want, rather than the left-right buttons there, are potentially stacked, which is probably a potential for another control template in here. I don't know. Background and foreground are probably irrelevant too. And actually, min height is probably irrelevant. Oh, no problem, Zen and Music. Good luck. Like I said, feel free to drop in anytime with questions. Yeah, I think we probably don't need most of those thingies set. And that'll get us a lot closer. Yeah. Something a little more akin to that. And I think that'll be a lot closer. And again, it's one of those, this is a new control. And it's not something that actually exists in the material design spec. So it's not like there's anything that I really have to go on. There's not a WPF control that I can go prior art on. There's not a material design spec for it. So it's on one hand, we're kind of free to do what we want with it. On the other hand, I'm trying to be somewhat, I hate releasing things and then breaking changes another version later. Yeah, so that's fine. You technically none of those are needed, but yeah, this is going to end up being the default here. One other thing I would probably do is give this guy a key of something like material design numeric up down. We generally reserve the implicit styles, which is what the ones without a key are, for being inside of the defaults here. So you'll note the whole point of the defaults section is to provide all of the default styles. So oftentimes this is where you'll get the implicit one. That way, as long as the user loads up the defaults dictionary, they get all the things done, right? Not a big deal. There's a couple of the controls I know we haven't been overly consistent where the defaults are stored somewhere else, but that is probably a worthwhile thing there. But overall, so let's see, this guy can go away. We don't need that. We don't need that. We don't need that. Lost focus. I don't even think you need this anymore. And you won't need to do this setup because the template will do all of that for you. So you don't actually need anything with the text box, I don't think. Which does beg the question, should it be declared as part of your template or not? I think the answer is yes. Let's write up the coalesce bit here too, real quick, just to show it. And I do appreciate the good commanding implementation. Some people just blindly call execute, which is 100% incorrect. You should check can execute and then call execute. Okay, so let's just confirm that this numeric up down works as expected. Clearly not. Excellent. Oh, it doesn't work as expected because I gave the thing a key and then didn't make a default style for it. So that's not going to work. Style, you got to learn how to type correctly. Style, target type. Let's see, X type, local. Actually, you know what? Let's just save ourselves some headache. You go away. You come back. I'm just going to drop the key. That way I don't have to think too hard. There. Save ourselves a little bit of trouble. Okay, so why do you... I will say, despite the operating system being called Windows, sometimes its windowing system is the biggest frustration. Okay. Stand by. Lungs need hydration. And my family was gifted a large container of fruit punch, and my wife informed me that neither her nor my kids like it, and so it is on me to consume it. And so I am bravely suffering through it. Suffering. Okay. Numeric up down. Okay, so that got me there, but that has now broken my setup. So something is wrong, because when I update this value, something is not increasing, decreasing appropriately. So why work? So let's track that down real quick, because you shouldn't need to do... Oh, I bet you I know why. It's probably the two-way binding problem. So if we go numeric up down and we look at value, value is being increased, right? I click the button. So the value of the dependency property is going up and down, but the value in the text box is not being updated. The likely culprit here is the dependency property of value. Yeah, so this guy here, rather than property metadata, there is a framework property metadata, and it comes with a... We want this guy here. So framework, property metadata options, and there's a bunch of stuff in here that are worth knowing about, but by far the most common one out of that list is binds two-way by default. So anytime you have a dependency property and you do a binding to it, the mode of that binding is determined by the target dependency property itself. So when you do a binding, if you don't set mode explicitly, you have no idea what the mode of that binding is without looking at the dependency property. The basic guidance is if the property is something that's user interactable, like the text property of a text box, for example, the expectation is that defaults to a two-way binding. Telerik, take notes. It should default to a two-way binding. If it is something like a command that isn't expected to have that kind of user does a thing and therefore something changes, then being one-way by default is perfectly fine. And if you don't set this binds two-way by default, you get a one-way binding. So if you would rather it be a two-way binding, the solution is go from property metadata to framework property metadata and use the overloaded constructor that takes in the enum. Another case where you might use that enum is if you've got a dependency property that should trigger like updates to render or layout. So if you have any of those, also set the enum value accordingly. Okay, now we go here, we go here, we go up, up, up. Oh, it's no worky. No worky. Why you no bind? Why you no bind? You were supposed to work. Okay. That whole lesson for it to not be the full solution. But never fear, we will find and track this down. So there's the text box. That's what I'm interested in. Text. It's interesting that this thing doesn't show a binding, though I can't say for certain that I'm surprised. We got rid of all of the underlying text box stuff. Yeah, this guy's now completely unused. That's coming in. You click the button. The value should be incrementing. And if I look up here at the Numeric Up down and I look at value, the value is bigger. Oh. I have a theory. Okay, so this, let's see, set current value. Let's see, value property, value +1. I have a theory. Oh, that's not going to compile. Semicolons are important in this language. Yeah. I get it. Semicolons needed. Hush. Trust me. Just do what I tell you. Okay. At some point, I'm going to set this up so that I have auto jumping between these two. 42. Didn't set again. Interesting. Okay, back into here. So we're going to go back up to here. Text. It's really shocking to me. Command. Value source is coming from the parent template. See, this is what I'm expecting, is things laid out via the parent template. Whereas here, when I look at the text, I get default. Something isn't working the way I expect. Something is not working the way that I expect. And I am not sure what it is yet. I'm also thinking that this thing probably should have let's see, padding. Template binding padding. Sorry, I just noticed the corner radius was defaulting to 10. And if you don't put any padding on that, it's going to bite you. Though it is questionable whether it should have a default padding of 8 or not, but at least now it's controllable. Why? Okay, let's go back over this here real quick. There's still 8 references. Is one of them... Oh, there's still a value assignment here. I shouldn't have that. I shouldn't need that. Okay, let's go back up here. Just want to see the references. Show them to me. Okay, so there's the only things accessing this. Let's get rid of this because that shouldn't be needed once we get to the rest of it. On property changed. Yes, this is all doing what I would expect. I'm just now confused why my template binding isn't behaving the way I expect. And I feel like this is something I should know the answer to, and I've just missed something. But yeah, so that padding's now obviously messed up my min width, which now needs to be another 16 points above, so that's probably more like 150. Let's relaunch that real quick and see. Why are you off here? Let's padding do something like 8.4, comma 4 on both of these guys. That'll clean up the sizing a little bit as well. Probably will let me reduce this. I'm guessing it'll look a little big. I would love to add some, yeah, that's a little big, but the buttons look a little nicer. I would love to add some kind of constructor parameters. Justin Bieber, thank you for the birthday wishes. Yes, last Tuesday when I was out on there. Welcome back. I am confused. So reviewing a PR for bringing in a new numeric up-down control, and I'm being dumb and can't understand why my template binding isn't working. Why is my template binding not working? The value is set. Why are you not? Why are you not properly propagating? Am I just stupid? Okay, I can't. Okay. Something is not sitting right with me. And maybe where do we have something similar to this? Like one of the pickers. Got to be one of the pickers that does something similar. Right? Something in one of these vicinities. It should be like time picker is another one of our controls. All right, time picker. All right, and time picker in here has a text box. Yeah. Text change, lost focus. Oh, because I am an idiot. Okay. Because we're not binding something from the outside in. We're needing to propagate the inside value out. Okay. So I'm just a moron. That's okay. Sometimes that happens. Okay, so let's see here. We need to do... let's see. Discard. And I want to do something akin to this. Discard selection. And then let's see, on value changed, we probably want to do this. I'm not sure we want to register for it here. Okay, let's start with that. Now we got it back. I think we want to deal with it up here. So we've got on value changed and coerce value changed. How about coerce value? Oh, that's right. Coerce numeric value. And how about we rename you to on numeric value change just for symmetry? Why is it? Cannot rename the. Oh, I'm debugging and it's lost its mind. Got it. Got it. Let's see. On. Yeah. Go ahead and yell at me. I get it. Cool. There we go. Coerce numeric value. Sudo make me a method. Thank you. Okay, so let's get a couple things fixed up right away because we've already got a couple things going all kinds of wacky mode. So if I prefer to call this value. If value is int numeric value value gets effectively I want to do the stuff that was happening here. I want to do right about here. And I want to go boom, boom. And then we want to return numeric value. Otherwise, return value because who knows what it was. We'll just let it through. Okay, and so here you'll note we don't have access to maximum and minimum because we are inside of a static member. There's a couple ways we could go about doing this. We could do d.get value. That's probably as good, but I think we'll just cast here. If d is numeric up down, and right, so something like that. And now we have access to these guys. Cannot convert from int to byte. Well, that's just because you're dumb. There, happy? Okay, so now we have the coerce done. This is now our centralized place where we're going to have our coerce. Perfect. That'll handle it. We've got one spot. No more thinking. Okay. The next one is on numeric value changed. And I generally like putting the value changed methods next to the dependency properties. That's just my own minor preference. So we're going to do this. I think I'm going to start the same way here. All right, boom. And I think this saves us on this. We no longer need that. Numeric up down. Great. Perfect. Okay, so that can raise the event. But the other thing that we want to do when this changes is we want to do numeric up down dot text box field null checking dot text gets e dot new value to string oh right, so that doesn't work. If numeric up down text box field is text box, all right, then we'll just bring this guy up. Go back. Thank you. Text box dot text gets that. And I think what we're going to do here is we know this is an int. If it wasn't, the cast above would have failed. And then I think here we want to be a little more intelligent about our toString. Because we could go after the language that way, but I think we're just as good off doing, and this is going to be specific, current UI culture. Because this is something that's actually being displayed, that's likely the intent. Okay, so that goes there, that goes there. Validate input should then be dead, which it is. We don't need to watch text change here. We don't need these guys. We probably still need this. But I want to do the same culture info, current UI culture. Okay, and then that means here we don't need this. And it should just work. Hey, Andrew. Great question. So at the moment, I am poking at this PR here. So it's bringing in a new numeric up-down control into the material design library. I will mention that the guy who put out the PR did message me on Discord and let me know that he's new to WPF and this is a learning experience. So I'm learning a little bit too as I remember all of this stuff. But playing around with it just so that we can leave good PR feedback. Okay, so that now works. That now works. That works. Cool. That min width is probably a little big now. That's probably way too big for that min width. And now I should be able to also do something like 42. Ooh, 42 didn't submit. We probably do still want to handle the text change on that, don't we? I think I probably do. So disappointing. So disappointing. Let's go up here real quick. Let's play with the min width for a moment. Let's see. 130 maybe. It's still a little big. There's no reason it needs to be any bigger than it has to be. Yeah, something like that is probably fine. I am also curious if we do something with the border, because the border isn't being set at all, but if we do something like, hey, do you not let me? Really? Snoop, I thought you had a color picker. There we go. I was like, I could have sworn we had one, and then border thickness of 2. All right, so it does have a border. I'm now wondering if maybe I set that padding a little too high too. Can we get away with 4? I don't know if it matters that much. We're going to dial it down. Do you think architecture in WPF is hard? I always overthink when designing my app. Yes. So there's a couple things I think that go into it. One, you have to remember how old WPF is. Like, WPF predates a lot of language features in C# that we would just consider ubiquitous now. Like little things like generics weren't a thing when WPF was first released. So to some degree, WPF is difficult because it's also old, and due to the insistence that we never break backwards compatibility, some of the old legacy stuff is still floating around there. Just a bit of the nature of the beast. Now, on the other hand, it also means that you can find docs from 10 years ago that are still perfectly valid and great to work with. So pluses and minuses both ways. But there are certain things inside of it that make it somewhat difficult to do. So it was designed with an MVVM architecture as the intent, because WinForms was its predecessor. It kind of had bindings, but bindings and WinForms, for anyone who's done them, they never really felt like first class things. Like you oftentimes did your UI to data synchronization manually with events and code behind and that kind of thing. Whereas WPF, XAML, first class citizen, it's designed to operate that way. When I'm teaching people like MVVM and structuring apps, I usually tell them this is a steep learning curve. It's worth it, but it's a steep learning curve, because you're throwing somebody right into the deep end. Even though I've done this for so long, it just feels normal and natural. Thanks for the sub. It feels natural to me, but it's not. A lot of developers, this is not normal to them. Like people who come to Maui or whatnot, it doesn't quite track. Even if they're used to doing layouts in an XML type situation, like maybe coming from Android, it's still not. That MVVM architecture is hard. And then you put things like dependency injection and testability on top of that, and brains explode, because there's a lot of pieces, and WPF doesn't necessarily steer you in the right direction. It kind of is more like a blank canvas and says, paint what you want, rather than, giving you nice lines and saying, here, you probably should paint inside the lines. It gives you none of that. It's, you have at it, good luck, and you're off to the races. There's several libraries around that try to deal with some of the awkwardness of the structure, like Prism's a very popular one. Let me point out one more. So I have been annoyed. I do a bunch of WPF apps, and I have gotten very annoyed with how difficult it is whenever I spin up a new app, because WPF doesn't have all the things in the box that I need. Like, it was designed for MVVM, but they didn't give you very many of the pieces. They gave you I command. They didn't give you a good command implementation to use in your view models. So even though you may start a project, to do it well, you have to bring in extra stuff. So I started a .NET template, feedback welcome, if people have feedback on what they would want. So there's a couple things in here that I've been poking at, and I keep revving it and improving as I find things on it. But if you are looking for how my current thinking on how I like to structure WPF apps, this is my starting point. So there is a lot of stuff bundled inside of this template. Here, let me just show it off real quick. CD temp. Let's go with WPF demo, right? WPF demo, .NET new WPF, boom. Da-da. Boom. So it comes with a bunch of stuff out of the box already set up. And again, this is Kevin's preferred way of setting up and structuring architecture in the app. And it doesn't get you all the way there, but it in my mind, it gets me pretty close. There's a few more things I actually want to add to this, and I may make a second WPF demo, because there's a lot of common things that I found myself doing, like stuff with HTTP client. This demo doesn't dive that deep, and it's like, well, I kind of want to have a template that also has like HTTP client with things like Poly already set up and all of that extra stuff. So the key one of the key things to note is the way that it does its startup is it does have an overridden main, and it's using the newer generic host pattern for actually going through and doing dependency injection to set up. So anybody who's done ASP.NET Core, this will feel familiar because that's where the pattern started. Oh, thank you. Again, feedback welcome. I've found bugs in my template. I've tweaked things. I've changed things. Again, this is every time I spin a new app, I use my template, and each time I go, you know, I want to change this or I want to change that, and I'm not overly happy. But I do things like I started off with user secrets, and I make sure that those are set appropriately. It has directory build props already set up, nullability already enabled. If you want to turn on some of the compiler stuff, I also tried to comment a bunch of these as well. If you need to do this underneath something else with another directory build props, I left myself, this was partly so that I didn't have to look it up every time. I left myself the code for how you do it. There's a build targets, it's empty. It does use centralized package management because this is one of the newer, nicer ways to manage your NuGet packages. It does have a NuGet config set up with all of the new NuGet config options to make sure that you have explicit package sources, so that if you need to do things like be really explicit about where your packages are coming from to avoid some sort of supply chain attack. Like if you've got packages that you're pulling in from a private feed, you want to make sure that you set up a package source so that somebody else doesn't, just start hosting that package with the same name on NuGet.org and accidentally, bring in the wrong package. That would be bad, right? That's why they have these package sources set up, why you should start with a clear. That way, if somebody hijacks a box and puts a NuGet config at the root, it doesn't override yours, yada, yada, yada. So there's a bunch of, again, there's a ton of stuff in here, and I keep telling myself I'm going to go and write good documentation on this. I haven't done it yet, and I'm sorry. If you want to be able to do a .NET publish and get a standalone exe out, I left the property group that you can enable for it. It is worth noting you do need to publish with release configuration, which I believe is going to be the default in .NET 8 SDK. But if you want to have that set up and you're unsure how to do, single file executable for .NET Publish, all of that's set up in here as well. All of this stuff is just kind of built and ready to go. So, and then I also, because the whole point, like if you do MVVM and you don't bother to unit test your view models, you're missing out on a lot of why the pattern exists with that separation. Right? Part of the reason we do the part of why having everything in the code behind was difficult was because it was a pain to test. Everything was tightly coupled together. Well, you loosely coupled it so that you could do things like test it. So if you don't end up testing, you're leaving a lot of that on there. What are you using for the MVVM stuff? Great question. So and I've hold on, shameless self-promotion. Hang on. Shameless self-promotion videos. Why is this not the right thing? Where's the search button? YouTube. Dev. So the community toolkit MVVM is the answer. What? Why is this not giving me my search one? There is a video I have on it, and as soon as I figure out where it is, stand by. Did this on a different one because I don't know what's about to show up when I click this button. Yeah, a lot of things do get nicer with the new generic host. I'll show you this here. So the community toolkit from Microsoft for MVVM, their 8.0 release, things got amazing. Like Sergio did amazing work. That whole team put out potentially one of the best MVVM libraries. If you're familiar with MVVM Lite, it is a spiritual successor to MVVM Lite. They started with the same APIs, but then revved everything to use all the new latest stuff. So They've got a bunch of analyzers built in so that you can stop doing bad things. They are using source generators. So you'll note I don't have to write all of the binding. I don't have to write the bindable properties. If you want the thing, community toolkit MVVM. Here, I can grab that. And we can go here, we can go here, we can go NuGet. Paste. This guy here. Yeah. This is by far this is by far one of the best. Oh man, I messed up my content. I didn't know that 8.2 dropped 3 hours ago. I got a new video to make. So I did a video when 8.0 dropped, and it quickly became one of my most watched videos. Let's see. YouTube, Community Toolkit, MVVM, WPF, something. Okay, this is how you know that it's good. This one, I can't find it when going to YouTube, but I can find it when I. Let's get rid of this. Boom. So if you want to see an introduction, this is the 8.0 release. It will cover most of the basics and also teach basic MVVM stuff. Their release notes will cover some of the newer things in 8.1. Yeah, if you're doing things with reactive, like reactive's good, but you are right. You kind of have to switch your mindset a little bit in how you approach things. And they aren't necessarily mutually exclusive either. Like there's been a number of times where I will still use some of the reactive components. But it is, you have to be intentional about when you do it. So, but again, if you pull in my template, that's the MVVM package I bring in, because doing commands, you get to do this. Like, that's perfect, right? Like, that's what you want. You want this kind of thing for doing all of the source generators and your relay commands. And more importantly, I don't demo it here, but if you want to go async, like say, then we have to clear the count, and then we can count again, and whoop, it just works. But if you want async commands, you type in async task, and poof, you have an async thing. The source generator is smart enough to wrap that up appropriately, and it is awesome. There are a couple cool. I will point this out. If you do async commands, one of the ones that always bites people is this allow concurrent executions. So by default, allow concurrent executions is false, so that if somebody's monkey clicking a lot on your button, it won't just fire your method over and over. Sometimes you want to allow concurrent executions, so you got to come in here and change this to true, but it defaults to false. That's the one I see bite people the most. And unless you know to go looking for that as an attribute on the relay command attribute, as a property on the relay command attribute, some people get confused as to how to handle it. Yeah, you'll see people leverage, because this library is just MVVM specific and not WP, like there's nothing WPF-y in it at all. You'll see people do demos with it, with Maui, with WinUI, with whatever. So anything that can do it. MRX, hey, good to see you too. Yes, I apologize. I had sickness, and then I had to travel. Had to travel. I got to travel for the Microsoft MVP Summit. So, and I will aka.ms.build. So anybody, if you are interested, there is tons of cool stuff coming at the Build Conference. It is free to watch things online. If you register, you'll also be able to go back and look at the recordings of the sessions after the fact. So even if you can't watch them live, I still would recommend signing up just so that you can go back and look at any sessions that look interesting. So I got to see a bit of a sneak peek of some of the stuff that is coming, and let me say, it is awesome. Well worth signing up for Build. I usually joke with people and call Build Geek Christmas, but I'm heavily biased. Yeah, done that. Lots of AI this year. Yes. For anybody who hasn't figured out Microsoft pattern, it is AI all the things right now. That's pretty much where they're headed. And it is kind of cool. If people are interested, we could look at doing some sort of AI examples in this kind of thing as well. With my MVP stuff, I did get access to the Azure OpenAI service, which is, it's basically the same service behind ChatGPT. And so you get to be, so you can do a lot of the same stuff and build it out, and yeah, it's kind of fun. They want to get their ROI in the AI stuff. Yes, amen. Will there be something about WPF? I don't know if there's going to be anything. Well, let me rephrase. The closest content that you will probably see about WPF is them advocating for people to upgrade off of it. So they have their upgrade assistant to try to rev people up and onto newer stuff. It doesn't really... Yeah, so the idea being they're wanting to get people to move up and off of it, and I have yet to try it against like my setup here to see how it works. Yeah, and Maui is definitely supposed to be one of the WPF killers, specifically WinUI 3, because that's the Maui head for desktop. And I shouldn't call them heads. It's now one unified project, something. Under the hood, you get a WinUI 3 app built. You just build it with Maui stuff, and away you go. So they're definitely pushing that direction, but it's one of those, I am waiting to see adoption before I jump ship, because they've threatened to kill WPF multiple times now, and they've failed multiple times. So yeah. Does Maui have a stable release already? Yes. Maui is definitely stable, definitely ready to be built on top of. Avalonia is the successor for WPF. Yes. I can definitely see that. And Avalonia actually put out let me go find it real quick. They tagged me in a tweet and I nearly died laughing when I saw it. It was hilarious. They ported the library, which I thought was hysterical. Where is it? Yeah, so one, there's this library for Material Avalonia, which this is actually a port for the Avalonia UI, but they did this guy here, boom. They also, and here I guess I should share this link as well. Boom. They tagged me in this tweet, and I nearly fell out of my thing laughing. So this is not a port, and they commented down here a little bit later. Yeah, it's XPF. So this is not an Avalonia port. They put the actual library and did their cross-platform Avalonia XPF stuff to run it. So yeah, this was just them showing off that, hey, look, we can run your stuff right out of the box without having to work that hard, which, points awarded, that's pretty cool. That is definitely cool. Let's see. Sorry, I got to catch up on some stuff. Yeah, the disappointment of the community because Microsoft made teams on React other than their technology. Yeah, Microsoft, though, they do give their teams a lot of autonomy to pick their own tech stacks. So I don't know how much there was design handed or how much the team was independently picking it, but yeah. That's interesting that you did Blazor on WinForms. The Blazor hybrid, that was my comment you just read. Yeah, sorry. The oh really? I I didn't make that connection. the Sorry, hold on. Gotta catch up. The Blazor hybrid stuff is actually one of the coolest bits of tech that I've seen in a while. It is the company I work for was evaluating building a new app out, and they were looking at different tech because they're like, well, there's going to be this web component. We think we want like a mobile component, and they were going back and forth trying to evaluate pros and cons of different solutions. And I was like, Blazor hybrid's a thing, and it's kind of cool. Like, it is very, very slick. So, but yeah, so at least in terms of WPF at build, I think the closest you're probably going to see to WPF being referenced is maybe in a Maui talk where they talk about upgrading off of it, or maybe something about like Upgrade Assistant where they talk about upgrading off of it. I don't know this for a fact, but that would be my strong assumption. But, and again, if you have feedback on app setup like this with the generic host, I am very happy to hear feedback on it. Yeah, closely web native but still fun. Yeah, and the other thing is some of the Blazor hybrid stuff, like in WPF, they'll do the Blazor hybrid, but it's using the WebView 2. No problem, Justin Bieber. And the WebView 2, you still run into the airspace issue in WPF. So for people not familiar with that, in WPF, you can embed native controls directly into your UI. But because of the way WPF is structured, those elements end up being drawn on top of your window and not actually part of your UI, the UI visual tree. Which means if you try to put like a button over the top of a WebView 2 control, like you put them both in the middle of a grid, the WebView 2 control, because it's drawn on top of your window, is always on top of your button, regardless of where you lay it out in your visual tree, which is the common way you'll see it referenced is the WPF airspace issue, and people have worked around it in a number of ways. They're all hacky, but that's one of the big drawbacks with like any of the newer web stuff. Even though they did Blazor hybrid for WPF, they did it, but in order to make Blazor work, you need the newer web bits. Like you can't use old web bits and expect Blazor to work, which meant WebView 2, but WebView 2 has airspace problems. So it's like, if you do go to do it, that's the only word of caution I have. Just make sure that wherever you want to draw your Blazor hybrid bits, you don't ever intend to overlay content on top of it. That'll also apply, like with the material design library, if you do like a drawer host, the drawer host will also go behind it. Will dialog host be able to show on top of it? Yes, the dialog host will show on top of it if you use the default style, because the default style for dialog host, the dialog is put in a pop-up, which is a separate window. So you jump, and that separate window in the dialog host is both a blessing and a curse. It causes a lot of bugs for people. But because the dialog is in a pop-up, it will sit on top of it. If you use the embedded dialog host style, it will not, because that's inside your visual tree completely. So yes-ish. Depends. Yeah, the way I did hybrid was more where there's just a bare minimum for the host window and the rest is done in Blazor. That's actually a really great way to do it. To be able to dive down and do it. Because if you do everything in Blazor, you don't, the airspace issue in like WPF doesn't matter anymore. It just goes away because you don't have any WPF content on top of your Blazor content. Yeah, Blazor, because that was the template I started from. Yeah, and at present, I don't think they've released any templates that are the Blazor hybrid templates aren't very good in my opinion. Like, which is why I started spinning my own templates because I was unhappy with them. I was like, this has to be better. This has to be better. So, have you heard of Phoneo.net? Much more lightweight than Electron. I have not, but now I have to punch that into the Googles. I assume this is the project you're referencing. Updated recently, small number of commits. How many releases do they have? Just the one? Or is that just latest? Oh, quite a few, or at least several. Interesting. WebKit-based browser controls. Interesting. Continuation Steven Sanders WebView experiment. Ah ha ha. I am familiar with Steven Sanders. Yes. No, I have not seen this. This is interesting. My only thought here would be wondering if this is still experiment level or if this is rock and roll. Build native cross-platform apps. I mean, this looks pretty good. Wow. This might be worth taking a run at some point. Web UI native, yeah. And of course, they Blazored all the things too. That's I feel like as much as Microsoft wants to AI all the things, all the web people at Microsoft want to Blazor all the things. Wow, that is a significant drop. There has been a huge push in .NET to get a lot smaller and a lot faster because especially in ye olden days, .NET was this big, heavy, clunky thing. That's not nearly as bad as it is now. Because especially the AOT compilation and the trimming actually can get you down quite small and quite fast. There are just a bunch of limitations with what you can do with ahead of time compilation. Because if you do AOT compilation in .NET, you have to give up the JIT. So you don't have that just-in-time compiler anymore because by definition, you're using an ahead of time compilation. And so there are some features that you can't do with like reflection emit to be able to build things at runtime because you just don't, like, there is no JIT there. It's not, you can't do that. So, but other than that, you can do some pretty cool stuff. I've also heard that like with the trimming feature turned on, you can get your binaries really small, but things that rely on reflection often will fail because the trimmer is fairly aggressive. And unless you have a library that's intentionally gone through and marked stuff so that the trimmer knows, hey, this is reflection invoked, don't just drop it. When it does its tree shaking, it tries to cut the whole tree. WPF is actually flagged in their documentation because if you go and look up like the self-contained or published ones, there are other switches in here for turning on trimming. You do not want to turn it on for WPF. The base WPF libraries were never designed with trimming in mind. It will fail. I promise it will. I got really excited one day because I thought I had it working. I was like, really? And then I tried to do anything of consequence and it fell over. So you might get an app to compile and launch. Beyond that, you're taking it in your own hands. Is fully trim compatible. Yeah. And that's one of the other things with a lot of the newer frameworks is they're trying to make sure that newer libraries have things like trimming enabled so that they can take advantage of it. Yeah, and that is, you're absolutely correct. That is one of the reasons for source generators is because now you can become trim and AOT friendly if you're doing things at compile time rather than at runtime. So effectively lower once you eliminate the need for the JIT, you can go really bloody fast. So they keep showing different benchmarks where, because people will oftentimes compare them to things like Go, where Go, if you do a hello world, is really tiny. And so like the ASP.NET Core team, they're like, well, okay, we've got kind of apples and oranges comparisons because people will compare their default .NET New template to like a default template from like some Go or Rust language. And they're like, okay, guys, you got to understand, their default template is hello world. Our default template has auth. Like, those are not the same feature set. you got to compare apples to apples if you're doing things like that to look at. Okay, I got horribly distracted, which is fine. We like distractions. Okay, so I think we're gonna fire this up, and as long as this is still working, I think I'm gonna go comment on this PR, and we can probably call that good. I think. But now I also I'm really curious to go and look at that 8.2 release of the community toolkit because I have to see what goodness they put in there. There was some features that I saw after 8.1 that were being worked on with some additional analyzers and whatnot that got me really excited. I'm like, give me more goodness. Give me more goodness. Okay. Boop, boop, boop. That's right. I think we were dealing with the 40. Yeah, we were dealing with the issue of text change not triggering or not posting back, which is where we were going to come into here and deal with that. So it was going to be text box field, text changed. It was doing it on lost focus, and I'm trying to decide if lost focus is the right place to do it. Yeah, numeric up down like the extended WP toolkit. I'm the one who asked for it in Discord, by the way. Perfect. So you probably saw the follow-up chat from what was it? Noob C# programmer. He's the one who opened a PR, which is what we're poking at. It's one of those. Normally I've pushed back on adding a bunch of controls, especially controls that don't normally exist in WPF and don't exist in like the default material design spec. But there's a handful of things that if they get asked for enough, they're probably worthwhile adding. Just by nature of people wanting things. So it's like, okay, we'll put stuff in. We'll put stuff in when needed. Let's see here. So we want to go here. We want to go here. And actually, you know what? I think the lost focus is probably better. Let's just put that code back real quick. Because if I go down here, I can do this, and I can go discard selection. I can go discard selection. We're going to leave the culture change. And I want something like this, discard selection. Boom. Yeah, give me that. Thanks. Thanks, you've been wonderful. Okay, so we don't need any of this. We don't need any of this. This really just needs to come down to, we don't want this bit here. So we want to do a if text box field text, and we want to do int.try_parse, and we want to do culture info dot current UI culture because we want to be culture aware, right? Whereas the format provider goes last. That's right. You go here. Let's see. You could just copy and paste from my apps. Yeah, so, and that's the thing is we do have the compatibility library with Ma apps that has something similar. And you make a good point. I should probably go look at what Juan has done and see what is there. Let's see. And I think I want to do number styles. What does integer give me? Because integer is a composite one, isn't it? 7. So it's going to give me leading white, trailing white, leading sign. I think that's all I want. I could do number and pick up, but these are decimal point, parentheses, trailing. Nah, we don't need all that. Integer will be fine. Yeah, you do need number styles when using culture. You are absolutely correct. Let's see. Out int numeric value. Call that good. And then we're going to go here. We're going to go set current value, value property. And we want numeric value to go in there. And we don't do any of the range checking because we're leaving that to the coerce. We'll only support int. At present, yes. Though I'd be curious to know the use case for it. Avalonia numeric up down is based on decimal. Interesting. Do they also have an option on their numeric up down for the increment amount then, I'm guessing? Because right now you can see the increment here is hard coded at 1 and -1. And I kind of feel like if you go to the effort of allowing decimal or any fractional bit, you almost have to have that increment value. Increment amount is configurable. Okay. Kind of makes sense. I'd be curious to know how often people use that. Yeah, at present, this is it's a draft PR at the moment. So I don't think it's going to merge right away, but I do plan on trying to put it into the 4.9 release. It probably just needs a little bit of love, though. There, and now if I type 42, 43, there we go. Okay, that makes me feel a little better. The width is still making me feel... I never lowered that, did I? I don't think I played with it in Snoop. Let's change. Because the minimum width should be as tiny as absolutely possible. And then people can override it as they see fit. Min width, let's do 110. How tiny is that? We can even go smaller. About 100. Yeah, let's go down to there. That's probably a reasonable one. And we're setting it in the style so somebody can override it if they don't like it. But at least then it doesn't completely shrink down. I think integer is 99% fine. Yeah, is it a breaking change if you start with int later and change it to decimal? Yes, specifically because the min maxes are going to be different and the types are going to be different. Though, so there's a philosophical debate about breaking change binary or source code compatibility, because in a lot of cases you can, like, I am okay making breaking changes when the impact is probably not that high. And for most people, if we were to switch from int to decimal later on, even though it would be a breaking change, the impact of that breaking change would probably be low. Because for most people, the conversion would just happen and it wouldn't matter. And so it would probably just work. So there'd be a little bit of that. The other thing that I wouldn't mind doing as well is, given that this thing is called numeric up down, I wouldn't actually be opposed to having a separate control for the decimal case, because I do think that in most cases it would work. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to change, is it was wiring up for mouse wheel even when the mouse wheel was over the buttons. And I don't think that's, because that's the other thing. And I'm curious, feedback of what people think. Do you want, because right now, the way you can change this is you can type in here, you can click the buttons, the arrow keys work for up and down, and mouse wheel also goes up and down. And I'm a little on the fence on the mouse wheel case, if that's a desirable feature or not. The biggest thing that gets me is when you have, like, you'll note if I do my mouse wheel over here, I can scroll up and down. But it means if you have this thing in any sort of scroll viewer, it's going to capture that scroll event and you're going to stop scrolling. And I always get annoyed when I'm using forms and I start scrolling down, and just because my cursor gets over, it then starts doing it. The mouse is optional under the property. Maybe even only on focus. Okay, I think I like that, of limit it to focus. That way if you scroll past it, it doesn't do it. Yeah, I agree. Mouse wheel was one of the ones I was very much on the fence on, of whether it should be there. I do like the idea of adding a focus check for it. We should probably do something about like that, right? Of limit it that way. Because I do like that idea of don't let it just blindly always go. Because key events are implicitly tied to keyboard focus, because that's where they're going to route to. Yeah, okay, so let's take a look at some of these changes. And I'm wondering if I should, okay, that change is worthless, discard. Okay, so do I push these changes straight to the branch or not? I'm somewhat tempted to. Yeah, I'm somewhat tempted to. I'm just looking to see if there's anything in here that's going to be overly confusing. That goes there, that goes there, that goes there, that goes there, that goes there. Okay, perfect. I think we're going to go with this. So working changes tonight's live stream, and here we find out if we kill it. Yeah, I agree that I think I like that too, Justin Bieber, of have a toggle for it to be on or off. Oh, good. Yay. Okay. I love it when people leave the checkbox checked to allow me to push back to the branch. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so let's go and leave some feedback on there. I've lost all my pull requests. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, pull requests. So refresh, we got some stuff going on. I'm just going to ignore the demo app because don't care. Okay, so feedback on here. we'll start while I'm thinking about it. We'll start with the mouse wheel. Let's see. Might be nice to create another dependency proper T to disable this behavior for those who don't want it. Okay, so we're gonna do that. Let's see. We'll do. I think I'll just catch them all right here. For commands, we should create new dependency properties for the command parameters. This should be similar to how the button works. Ba-bum. So he goes there, goes there, goes there. Goes there. Oh, I undid my changes and I forgot to... Hang on, I'm going to clean those up real quick. So we don't need the null forgiveness operator there, or there. Those are all not needed. Question. By default, should the mouse wheel work or be disabled? My gut reaction says disabled. But I am open to feedback. Like, I'm leaning slightly more towards the disabled side, but I'm at like a 60-40. I don't know if it matters too much to me. Okay, was there anything else in here that I wanted to clean up the using? I think that was it for here. I think that handles all of those, handles all of these. I think that is there. I think this is fine. I think this is fine there. That's fine there in the generic one, so we'll mark that as good. I'm not sure if we want this border or not. I'm a little torn. Like, on one hand, it's nice, but like, the control itself has things like border brush and border thickness. So if you omit this border, you're taking away, and somebody sets the border brush property, they then just file a bug and say, why doesn't the border brush property work? It's like, well, because the template didn't use it. But it's also not something I see being used a lot. And you generally don't want to increase your visual tree if you don't have to. That's one of the WPF performance things, is if you have very deeply nested visual trees. And I will admit, some of the material design templates they add a lot of stuff to your visual tree. And I'm sorry. I keep toying with ideas of how to kind of tease things apart without making my life miserable for maintenance. Because you don't know what feature somebody might turn on, and so you have to have all of the things there. I guess it's fine. It's one border control. It'll go back and forth. We'll see. I think in here, though, I cleaned up everything that was not needed. I do think a separate, at least one more template I would probably create. Because I suspect, at least personally, I want the one with the stacked buttons rather than the side-by-side. I think that's probably more likely my go-to. And then I think the only other thing I would probably do is write some UI tests over this as well. That's fine. Let's see. And I think would be nice to put in a few more examples showing the commands min and max. Let's see. Is there anything else on there that was useful? I think it would look better if the buttons were both on the right side, maybe as half buttons stacked on top of each other. Currently does not look like one control. I can agree with that. Like I said, I think for me personally, I like the stacked look of those buttons, and I would probably do the thing where you round the top two corners on the top button and the bottom two corners. That way it looks like a single pill shaped. Because I've done that a bunch with the material design buttons where I'll stack them. I'll literally just put two buttons next to each other. But because of how you set up the border and clip the shadow, it ends up giving you that kind of, what do they call it? Split button? I don't know if that's the right word. Type feel to it. I don't know what that one looks like. Yeah, so the decimal with the steps is definitely doable. The question is, do we want to bite that off or not? Numeric up downfield. What do you look like? Picture? Yeah, something like this definitely is. This is actually a nice style. This lends itself well to the same way that the text fields look. Fields. Because we've got something similar with, those are password boxes, but we've got, let's see, the reveal password boxes. Why do I not? Oh, yeah. Where you've got the text box with the backing field and the underline control and similar. Because then we can forward in things like the floating hint and that sort of thing. Because right now the floating hint isn't actually making it in, and it might be nice to wire those up. That's another good comment. I might actually steal this. Any other styles? We'll do this, and so we'll do that. Let's go back down to the XAML. Let's see. We'll go here. One idea for a cleaner look could be to match the look of the one. We'll hyperlink all the. Oh, dang damn it! I can't type. No. There. Okay. Let's see. Also, make sure you can align the number horizontally. That is a good point. Thank you. Let's see. This. We probably want to consider forwarding the and line on the parent here. So effectively this and default the value to centered in the style setters. Probably also want to forward the text box hint properties. Let's see here. I can probably get a good link for those. because I don't remember what the full set is. Let's see, but I think if I go and look at the default text box style, it has them all at the top of the style. Let's just search hint. Blah, blah, blah. No, no, no. Just this thing doesn't show it. Maybe I'll grab it off the demo app then. It's probably just worried that somebody's going to think that that's what I'm suggesting and it's forwarding them. Oh, I keep wanting to look at text boxes, but it's under fields. Okay, show me. Let's see. Floating hint. I'll just grab these. Let's see, back to here. And down to here. These are attached properties that into the text box that consumers can change them. Boom, something like that. I will say though, for somebody's first rev at doing a custom control in WPF, this is not that bad. This is fairly good. I've definitely seen a lot worse. Still, that hard-coded corner radius is making me twitch, but I just question if we should drop the entire border control or not. It's like, what's more likely? Somebody to use the property being happy it's not functional. I mean, they can always wrap it in a border. But then they're arbitrarily making their nesting larger because I didn't implement a property. API is hard. API is hard. Okay, I think we're going to go like that for now. Let's see. One other thing that would be good to do is write some UI tests for this control. You need any help setting that up? Let me know. So we'll do that. Because I'm fully aware, I tell people to write UI tests, but like oftentimes if somebody struggles with the UI tests, I am very happy to go and write the test for you, because I realize this UI testing library is my library, and I just, even though I think it's easy to use, I don't know that it's easy for people to use. But like, this doesn't seem terribly difficult. It's pretty easy. Slap in your control, pull the stuff out, and away you go. And it does all the things. But at least this way you can have some nice assurity, like those tests I was doing where I, double click on the text box to select the text. I type in a value, then I click the plus button, and I expect the value to increment by one more than whatever I typed in. So, yeah. Not great for large numbers, yeah. So, but I do like it. I was contemplating looking at doing something else, or giving myself a slightly different interface into doing this testing, because I know there's there's various work happening around trying to figure out how to test other apps that aren't web. Like web UI tests, like web developers are spoiled for choice when it comes to UI testing frameworks. They have not only good choices, they have multiple good choices, which is shocking. And thick client apps, we just don't have much. Like there's not much for Maui. There's not much for WPF. And so, especially if you want to do something lower level, because most of the desktop ones go through the accessibility APIs, which are great for simulating user input. They are horrible for doing assertions on your UI tree. Absolutely horrible, because they want you to only look at individual bits. Have you tried verified XAML? I have not, but I believe that was one that I looked at. Let's just pull it up and confirm. Because this is, yeah, this is Simon Kropp's one. Yeah, because this is leveraging snapshot testing to be able to go through and do it. Which is great, but it's not quite. I'm trying to remember where the. This is his basic one. Where is the XAML bits? Because snapshot testing is a very nice way of doing verification of XAML UIs. There, this guy. Being rendered as a verified XAML. Yeah, so you set up your XAML bit and go through and do it. The disadvantage here is this doesn't have like an interaction model to it, I think is what I came to the conclusion of. That it does, because I want to be able to do like for example, like the dialog host is a better one. I want to be able to do something like this where I pop in the controls, I do some clicks, I validate the text, I click on some other stuff and go back and forth. And that's where things start to get a little more challenging, because the way this actually ends up working under the hood, you'll note this isn't using the XUnit like STA fact for being able to create UI elements. This doesn't run on a UI thread. What it does instead is it spins a full WPF app shell and then injects content into that. So it's actually the full rendering pipeline and all of that jazz, which is both a blessing and a curse. This works well for certain things. I don't know how well like the big advantage with snapshot testing is when people have like these full snapshots or oracles built up, you get really nice diffs when there's changes that comes in. Like we use snapshot testing a lot when we're like producing NuGet packages and the public API matters, because there's lots of libraries out there that will rip through an assembly and give you a string representation of your API. And then it means when anybody makes a change that modifies that public API, you actually see that show up in the diff, which is great. That's what you want. You want to know, like if you're producing something for developers to consume, how the shape of your public API is kind of a big deal. But the snapshot testing is awesome for things like that. I know some of Simon Kropp's stuff, he's done a lot where it's like full object snapshots. So even like in memory objects, because ultimately he's looking to get that same sort of assertion syntax where it's, I've got object A, object B, show me the diffs, right? Like that's been a problem people always fight with when you've got a deep object model and you're like, are these two things equal? Yuck, that assertion is ugly, and how you show when they aren't equal is really hard. But like his verified test library does the same thing. A lot of like approval test does the same thing. They'll pop your default diff viewer with like a JSON representation of the objects. And then it becomes really obvious where the diffs are. I wonder why there is no headless WPF. I think largely because WPF was written before that kind of thing was popular. And that's part of why, like, you can kind of do headless WPF. And I think we do it in our tests. So you can kind of do headless type testing, but anything that acts on the UI bit has to be on an STA thread, but conveniently, X units extendable. It's easy to do that. You just STA fact, and you have to make sure you're using the STA fact NuGet package, but not a big deal. The biggest drawback when you run in this type of mode is you run into situations where you now have to do this kind of type setup. Is you have to instantiate your control, you have to apply the style, you have to basically make sure that you've done the same sort of arrange, layout, render pass that the WPF framework would have done for you, which is why like we had started writing tests like this, and I haven't deleted them because they provide value, but at the same time, there's no guarantee that what I do here matches what the framework's going to do. And so these became really brittle because there was always bugs that would creep in when it's like, oh, well, in order to, make this work, you have to manually raise the loaded event after you've done the style. And also you have to make sure that a measure pass and a layout pass has occurred. And it just got obnoxious, which is why for my XAML test library, I spin the shell and just load content into it, because then I'm legitimately in a full WPF app. I get the full rendering pipeline of whatever that system's going to do, which can sometimes be obnoxious, but it actually works on a pipeline too, which is kind of fun. So that was my motivation, is there was no good library that I found that let you do component level testing and access to things on the visual tree with interaction. Like that was what I wanted. I wanted to be able to test an individual component, interact with it, and then validate things out of the visual tree, not just things with accessibility stuff on it. Because I always like being able to see things like, oh, did the validation pop and, did the text turn red or whatever. Would be great if verified XAML and XAML tests could be used together. That's a good point. They shouldn't be necessarily mutually exclusive. I don't know if verify XAML is what you would want to use, but you certainly should be able to use any sort of approval-based testing, because the fundamental part of approval-based testing is being able to get down to a string representation of whatever the thing is. I don't know how hard that would be to do. It's probably not that difficult, actually. Because you'd effectively just need to make sure that you call verify XAML initialize at the right point. I think the key thing for XAML test is this would need to be invoked in my my WPF app shell. But I already support things like callbacks and whatnot from the shell back into the test project, so it would not be difficult to do. You obviously couldn't do it as a module initializer, but it knows when the app is starting, and having that as a callback would not be difficult. I am noticing that this thing is, like, I see things like AV button. Yeah. This, I suspect from looking at this is the text representation of the BAML, not the originals, not the XAML itself. Because when WPF gets compiled, under the hood, if you go and pop open the assembly, you'll see in the, well, hang on, I could tell you, or I could just show you. Yenspy, come here. Boom. DNSpy was giving me crap earlier, so we'll see if it actually launches. Bin debug. Did you crash DNSpy? I can't tell. Might need to go and reset it. It's loading, it's thinking, it's doing something. Okay, so close you. Okay, so if we go and look at, let's see. So this is demo. The interesting bits in a WPF app are in the DLL, not the exe. But if you open this guy up, is it resources? Yeah, so you'll note what actually gets compiled under the hood is these BAML resources, not the actual XAML. And DNSpy does a nice little thing where it tries to show a reasonable representation of it. But it's worth noting that these are not exactly the same in a lot of cases. You'll find that the BAML is expanded out, and this is actually effectively a binary representation of what the XAML was, so that WPF could load quickly. So the XAML gets compiled. It's not really compiled. Converted feels like a better answer. But I suspect what's happening here is it's reading the BAML files, loading them into like an X document, and then formatting it appropriately. I'm guessing that's the intent, or how it's working under the hood. So this thing does have this concept of a host window, which makes me wonder if it is throwing things inside of a separate window. Screen capture, XML. Let's try to grab the stuff back out. You make a good point, though. XAML to string. XML text writer. There's the text writer. X document. Builder to string. Document root. Yeah, but where did you get this from? Interesting that those are the ones that are getting dropped. Just from the root. Okay. Those must be ones that are set by host window, I would guess. Interesting. Yeah, so it takes the element, uses the XAML writer to push it in. So this is going to get the runtime version of your elements, which is not bad. But it is going to be a lot closer to your BAML representation than your XAML representation. But in the case of this, it doesn't really matter how ugly it is, because I had actually looked at using it. Oh, Justin Bieber, you may have just made my day. You may have just made my day. Hallelujah. Yay. Yay. Oh, hallelujah. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This makes me very happy. Sweet. I do not want to give up my DNSpy. No, but you do make a good point. There is some improvement to happen for XAML tests. It was actually doing the display like that was actually one of the things that I had considered with Show Me the XAML. So this is the thing that's actually powering all of these little pop-ups. The big difference between how Show Me the XAML is working and doing that XML reader on an element is this is done at compile time, looking at the actual XAML file. So it actually matches what was written inside the demo app XAML versus trying to evaluate it at runtime. Because some things get expanded out and it's ugly. And the whole point was to try to show users what XAML they needed to put in their app in order to make that happen. Sorry, when you say what is that thing, I assume that that's referring to DNSpy EX. So DNSpy is a decompiler for .NET that I have loved very dearly for a long time, but the original author very suddenly one day marked the repo as archived and disappeared. And there was like a real short Reddit thread at one point asking about what was going on, and it was very, I never fully understood the reason why it got shut down. But beauty of open source, apparently somebody decided to continue on, which is exciting. It's also one of the few decompilers that has a debugger built in, so you can actually drop into DNSpy and do things like fire up an arbitrary assembly and debug into it. That's a thing you can do, which is frankly kind of awesome. Like, we can do this and launch. Like, that's kind of cool that you could just drop in. The other thing you can do is you can edit. That's like, the amount of power in this thing is ridiculous because it'll take a DLL, let you make edits in C#, recompile those, and reinsert the IL. Now, obviously, if the assembly was signed, it can't re-sign unless you have the certificate and whatnot to redo that. But it is my go-to choice for decompiling and inspecting assemblies when I don't have like a repo or something to work with. If I have a repo, repos are better. I'd rather get somebody's code than decompile their stuff, because decompiling is always going to look a little uglier. But it is definitely my preferred option. And so hearing that it's no longer dead and somebody's keeping it going makes me really happy. Okay, I've been talking for 2.5 hours straight. I haven't had much caffeine, so I am probably going to wrap this up for tonight. In terms of the material design library, Nikolai had commented earlier that he's got one other item he's working on. I might hold the 4.9 release for... In fact, I'm going to just slap this on the milestone. I might hold the 4.9 release to try to get this in. There's nothing major in the 4.9 release, but there's a lot of useful stuff in here, and it's just slowly been growing. I didn't know if I was going to actually release this or if I was just going to get the 5.0 stuff done. I've got most of the theming things for the 5.0 working and in. I'm actually having the generator writing the test for it now too, so that I can have reasonable test coverage over it, because I'm tired of it not working perfectly. For those people who may not know what I'm talking about, there is this and this. These are the two big ones. A bunch of broken changes have been done, and then this theme brush rename is, right now the old naming scheme didn't lend itself well to adding more brushes, and I would like to be able to break out the brushes to be control or style specific, so that oftentimes people will ask, hey, how do I change the color of X? And because the same brush is reused in so many places, there's not a clean way to say, oh, if you just want to change that color, here's the brush. But yeah, but I also don't want to manage 100 different brushes. So what I've done is I've generated up a JSON file that's going to be the source of truth, and then a generator does all the things. That way, whenever we need a new brush, you slap it in the file, you hit go, and then everything happens and it just works. So that way, I think it'll set it up better going forward long term. It also then allows me to generate out starter or template things if people want to roll their own stuff. There's a long-standing PR for a full theme editor that I don't know if this would merge as is, but the intent behind this is good. And so part of the hope is that once 5.0 goes, it would be much easier to build out kind of that theme editor for people's, and just hand them the file and say, here's your theme that you built. Slap this into your app, have fun, and off to the races, and have it not suck. So that's the goal. I realize I've done multiple breaking changes around brushes over the 3, 4x releases. I'm hoping 5x will be the last major breaking change, and then everything else builds on this. So that's the game plan. That's where it's going. Yeah. Cool. So with that, I think I'm going to sign off for tonight. Thank you everyone for dropping back in. It was nice seeing so many familiar faces and all the back and forth interaction. I very much, I love questions. I love feedback. And like I said, I apologize for my absence for several weeks, but I am back. I did not go away. I was just, coughing up a storm and felt like crap. So needed to rest. So happy coding. I'll see everyone next time.